Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Michael Morris. Michael serves as the executive director of both the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, which are located in Jackson, Mississippi. During the program, we'll find out why and how the museums came about and all they have to offer visitors, the community, and beyond. In the process, we'll come to better understand and appreciate these museums' missions, their impact, and the ways in which history and human rights intersect in Mississippi. Let's start by meeting Michael and then finding out about both the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. Welcome, Michael. So delighted to be able to be here.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
It's been fascinating just beginning to tip the iceberg of learning about both of the incredible institutions. Eager to find out more and have you inform viewers. But before we jump right to that, I think it would be of interest if you just briefly share a little bit about your background and professional interest, please.
Sure. First and foremost, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and started out my public history career actually at Jackson State University,
Yeah.
which is where I went to school, and started out working at a place called the Margaret Walker Center, working as a student assistant in the archives there, working with Angela Stewart, Dr. Robbie Luckett. And then later on, during graduate school, I actually worked at the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute on Citizenship and Democracy,
Mm.
which was a organization that brought down teachers, graduate students, and college professors from across the United States to do civil rights tours throughout the American South. But then with that organization, what we also did was we did a historic preservation project on a building called the Council of Federated Organizations building.
Hmm.
And as you might know, Jay, Council of Federated Organizations was a important umbrella organization during the civil rights movement here in Mississippi. And so I got a chance to work with leaders at the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute
Mm.
to save that building. But just to keep a long story short, I started here at the Mississippi Department of Archives and History almost 9 years ago
Wow.
in our public information office. And then later on, I became the director of public relations, director of public engagement, and I've been the director of the two Mississippi museums since August 2023. And it's been a
Fabulous.
wonderful blessing.
Fabulous, fabulous, and a wonderful opportunity for both of the museums to have you as the executive director, given the background that you just shared.
I appreciate you saying that.
What was the original vision for creating the two museums side by side, one focusing on Mississippi's history, long history, and the other, the civil rights journey? And how do they complement each other while maintaining distinct identities?
A great question, Jay. So, in many ways, the state of Mississippi has always had a state history museum. One of the earliest versions of it was actually situated in the basement of what we now call the new state capitol.
Hmm.
We've got two state capitol buildings in the city of Jackson, the new capitol, the old capitol. The old capitol was completed in 1839. It's the oldest building in Jackson. And then the new capitol, I believe, was completed in 1903. But the new capitol, when the Mississippi Department of Archives and History was founded in 1902, it was situated in the new capitol.
Ah,
And the first director, Dunbar Rowland, began collecting and had on display what we would consider today a small state history display. But then in 1961. Um, throughout the 1950s, the old Capitol Museum, the building that was con constructed in
Hmm.
1839, underwent a restoration project, and they reopened it in 1961, just in time for the Civil War centennial,
Mm.
as a state history museum. And so that building operated as the Old Capitol Museum of Mississippi History from 1961 to 2005.
Okay.
And what happens is in 2005, the roof of the Old Capitol is torn off during Hurricane Katrina.
Mm.
All of the artifacts, and I mean, we've got more than 15,000 artifacts in our
Ah.
collection, were removed out of the building.
Mm.
The building reopened in 2009 as a building to itself.
Mm.
So just talking about the events that took place there with the hopes of opening a state history museum, a brand new building. Um, there had been some efforts on the campus of Tougaloo College to create a civil rights museum dated back to the late 1990s. And so an organization called the Veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement really got together and started trying to assemble papers and artifacts related to the movement here in Mississippi.
Hmm.
Long story short, in or about 2010 or so, perhaps 2011, Governor William Winter, who was the governor of the state of Mississippi from 1980 to 1984, and Judge Reuben Anderson, who was the first African American to serve on the state Supreme Court, convinced the governor at the time, Governor Haley Barbour, to construct both of these projects in the same building, sharing the same spaces, store, auditorium, cafe, right there in
Mm.
downtown Jackson. And he thought it was a great idea. He thought it would be a great cost saving measure, as one point of it. And so groundbreaking took place in 2013, and the museum's opened on December the 9th, 2017. And you hit the nail on the head, Jay. One of the intentions of these museums is to speak to one another.
Mm.
You cannot understand the civil rights movement here in Mississippi without understanding antebellum Mississippi. Well, let me go back colonial Mississippi,
Hmm.
antebellum Mississippi, the Civil War, which is subjects we cover a lot more intensely in our state history museum. And for sure, Reconstruction in the state, we cover that a lot more intensely in our state history museum. And that lays the foundation for what you see in our Civil Rights Museum, which takes a very specific focus on 1945 to 1975, when we make the argument that Mississippi was ground zero for the civil rights movement nationally.
You know, what role did the collaboration between historians, artists, community members play in shaping the exhibits and the museums themselves?
It's a great question. My understanding is, this is an idea that kind of dates back to the 1970s. There was a woman by the name of Patty Carr Black that came and started working for the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. She had had experience working all around the country with the Smithsonian and et cetera, but she found her way to archives and history here in Mississippi. And she really encouraged archives and history to start doing more community outreach. And so they founded a community advisory committee back in the late 1970s that comprised of folks from different communities all across the state, ethnic communities, religious communities. And so that idea, that gem, is kind of what they use in the creation of both of these museums.
Hmm.
They both had community advisory committees, and they both had scholarly committees. But the most important thing that they did in terms of creating the exhibits for these museums is they had community meetings throughout the state,
Mm.
especially in the communities that they planned on describing in the museums. And so, for example, in our Civil Rights Museum, it's a reflection of the entire state. And so they met in places like Greenwood, Mississippi, or Biloxi, Mississippi, because these are
Hmm.
prominent places in the Civil Rights Museum. And
Most
they got a
definitely.
chance to hear from people in terms of what they wanted to see. And my understanding is that at each of those meetings, individuals stood up and made clear that they expected the state of Mississippi to tell the unvarnished truth about what happened in the past. That's an important nugget that I forgot to mention up top. Our Civil Rights Museum is the first state-sponsored civil rights museum in the country. The Mississippi Department of Archives and History is a state agency.
Mm,
So there was a lot of skepticism in the civil rights community. And I think those community meetings really did help allay some concern about what they were going to see.
interesting, interesting. You know, we're fortunate to have some images at the museum,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna take a little look and starting off with the Museum of History. Can you share a little bit about how it's laid out and then highlighting what we're seeing in the images as we go through a few?
Absolutely. So the image that you have up right now is the tagline for that museum, One Mississippi, Many Stories. And what I love so much about this image is it's a cutout of the state of Mississippi divided into the four
Mm,
congressional districts.
mm,
And what you can see if you look at it closely is African Americans, Jewish Mississippians, white Mississippians, the entire swath of the population of the state, because the history of this state in terms of immigration is an important component of the story as well. And so this image really does give you a sense of what you're going to see when you go to the museums. What's unique about this is at the midway point in the museum, you can see this particular cutout, from what we call our lookout. But then also you see this as you get ready to exit the museums. So I
mm.
thought that was a pretty ingenious way to kind of drive home the point that we're trying to make, that although we've got different stories in terms of how we got here, we're still one Mississippi. And
Most
so,
definitely.
yeah,
And this is a fabulous overview, speaking to the point of just the chronology that's covered throughout the museum.
that's right. There are about 8 galleries, and this is actually a photo from that lookout I was describing. You can see the
Hmm.
one Mississippi mini stores cut out deep in the back there.
Yes, yes.
Um, but it's interesting. That museum is 2 floors, right? And so the first floor, when you first walk in, is primarily about the Native American experience, colonial Mississippi. So European contact. And then you go upstairs and you see all this information about antebellum Mississippi and the Civil War. And then lastly, as you're coming, before you go to the lookout, you see this collection of uniforms representing Mississippi's participation in each of the armed conflicts going back to the Mexican American War. And so by the time my mom came out of that exhibit onto the lookout and she saw how much was left for her to see, I mean, her mouth dropped and she said, Michael, I got to just sit down for a second. It's,
Understand.
it's, it's a huge museum. And, I think we've got like 1,500 artifacts on display there. And I
Wow.
think she was just staggered by how much, was available to see just from this lookout, this photograph that you see right here.
And I know the way the exhibits are done are so engaging, lots of storytelling and other design features that
Hmm.
really embrace the visitor interaction throughout the experience to
Hmm.
better appreciate it. Could you share a little bit as an example of what we're seeing here, please, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the first galleries after you go upstairs. This is the first gallery you see when you go upstairs. It's called Joining the United States. It's about Mississippi becoming the first and foremost of Mississippi territory, 1898, 1798. And the process of Mississippi becoming a state finally in 1817. And if you go into that gallery, one of the most prized artifacts that we have on display there is a 20-star flag. As far
Mm,
as I know, it's the only 20-star flag in existence. And just for your audience's purpose, Jay, I know you know this, but they'd add a new star each time a state was added to the Union. And
hmm.
so that 20-star flag represents when Mississippi became a state. And the
Okay.
reason why it's so rare is because immediately the next year, I can't remember whether it's Illinois or another state joined the union.
Ah,
And
okay.
so they're not a lot of 20-star flags. We have a large one on display in that gallery. And it's also an example of a conservation project that that we actually underwent right before the museum's open. We also
Terrific.
have on display in that gallery a Bowie knife
Mm,
representing territorial justice. We also have some dueling pistols. So this is the Wild Wild West, during this
yeah.
particular time period. And so there's just a lot of just different artifacts representing this tumultuous time period where Mississippi is trying to figure out what is going to be its economic crop, what's going to be its economic driver. My understanding is that they experimented with tobacco farming, with creating indigo, which is a very nasty process, and finally they landed on cotton. And
Hmm.
so what that young lady is looking at there in that picture is a replica cotton bale. But next to that cotton bale is an actual cotton gin from the slavery era.
Oh, oh, wow.
And so she's reading information about turning points that took place during the 19th century, 18th and 19th centuries, in terms of us becoming what they call the Cotton Kingdom
Hmm.
right before the Civil War.
And as you're giving that commentary, I'm noticing just from this one image, the wonderful context the museum provides for the
Hmm.
overall exhibit, just from some of the graphics on view here. For
Hmm.
the sake of time, I want to share just a little bit about this part of the museum and then move on to the Civil Rights Museum. But what are we experiencing here, Michael?
So this is a replica barge ship that we have on display in the Museum of Mississippi History. It's right across from joining the United States Gallery, but it's actually a theater. And
Ah.
so what you see on those screens there is a really, really fascinating film that we created in consultation with scholars of the institution of slavery in the state of Mississippi. And again, it's about the Cotton Kingdom. It's about 10 minutes long and it's kind of setting the context in terms of the population. So, for example, by the time the Civil War starts, Mississippi has a black population that outsizes the white population. That's something a lot of folks don't know. This was a majority black population at the start of the Civil War.
Mm,
And so that helps you understand why Mississippi decided to secede from the Union in 1861.
mm,
Coincidentally, in that same building I mentioned earlier, the old Capitol, in that House chambers where they seceded from the Union. But that film is really, really excellent. Like I said, it features scholars like Dr. Daphne Chamberlain, who used to teach at Tougaloo College, and
mm.
individuals that used to work with the National Park Service. And so it's really grounded in scholarship and information that you can find next door in the Mississippi Department of Archives and History.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can see just from the little bit you've been sharing why your mother needed and wanted to sit down after touring just a little bit of the museum. Well, we could go on and on, but for the sake of time, which is about 10
Yes.
minutes or so, definitely want to hear about the Civil Rights Museum. And I know
Hmm.
what we're seeing here, which you'll explain, is maybe one of the more iconic features of the museum. What are we experiencing here, Michael?
Absolutely. So this is actually the centerpiece of the museum. The Mississippi Civil Rights Museum has 8 galleries. Each of
Mm,
those galleries begin and end in this particular gallery. And it's called This Little Light of Mine. And it features a 37-foot tall light structure that is like nothing you'll ever see in the world because it was made specifically as a monument to the work of the civil rights veterans here in Mississippi. And all the light tendrils go into each gallery and point into each direction in terms of north, west, east, and south to represent the lights that was already here in the state of Mississippi, but then also the lights that came into the state to help create change. And
Mm,
yes, this is an excellent example of how we use that gallery. We hold a lot of lectures in this gallery. We have on staff somebody that was arrested at 13 years old in
mm,
1961. His name is Mr. Hezekiah Watkins. He was the youngest participant in what we now know of as the Freedom Rides. He speaks from this particular gallery.
mm,
The faces that you see up there in the wells are some of our movement heroes. You can kind of see their faces behind the lights with glasses on. But then the names that you see in lights in those black exhibits that you see that surround that gallery as well, those are people that we consider martyrs of the modern civil rights movement,
mm.
dating all the way back to Reverend George Lee in 1955, who was murdered in Belzoni, Mississippi. And so if you work at our museums, you've got to know about who each of those individuals are. And the other thing I like about this picture is every 30 minutes, the exhibit plays music from the movement. And what a lot of people don't realize is the music that you hear actually features veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement.
Wow.
And so what I like about this picture is, this is supposed to be a place of joy. It's supposed to be a place of reverence, of course, but it's also a place of joy. And so I like the fact there's a photograph of children singing in that central gallery.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. We're fortunate to have a clip of
Mhm.
some of the music, so we're going to just enjoy just a snippet of it.
This little light of mine.
I'm gonna let it shine.
This little light of mine.
Oh, I'm gonna let it shine.
Said this little light of mine.
Oh, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Well, we are going to move on just for the sake of time, Michael. But that's a feature that appears, as you say, throughout the day for people to experience, however they might be ending up or winding through the museum. And one
Right.
more exhibit area that focuses on some of the notable individuals connected with the movement.
Absolutely. So this is an separate but equal gallery. And this is, as you turn the corner, the centerpiece of that gallery is a schoolhouse that's divided by the middle. It's supposed to show you an example of what a white schoolhouse and a black schoolhouse looked like, in the 1950s. Surrounding the schoolhouse are actually photographs taken by the state auditor's office in 1954, 1955 that shows you photographs. This is from the state archives. Black school, white school, same county, same year, interior, exterior of the schoolhouse. And you can really see the stark differences between the resources that
Hmm.
were allocated to the school districts and to the school system. And so, so what you're seeing here is, first I'll start at the end here. 1944, very, very important Supreme Court case, Smith v. Allwright.
Hmm.
You see, in Mississippi, the Democratic Party had an all-white primary that was instituted in the early 1900s, probably 1902, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And so the Smith v. Allwright Supreme Court case, which I think took place in 1944, the Supreme Court ruled that was illegal. And so that set the tone for something that's going to happen 20 years later in Mississippi during Freedom Summer, culminating in Fannie Lou Hamer's powerful and riveting testimony to the Democratic National Committee's Credentials Committee
Mm.
during the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City. And then the rest of this gallery is about the creation of these networks that the TRM Howard and the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, who hires an individual that just graduated from Alcorn State University and got married, named Medgar Evers, who would go on to become the first field secretary of the NAACP in the state of Mississippi. So it's just kind of showing you all these connections that are taking place in the 1950s. That's what this entire gallery is about, the 1950s. And when you go around that corner of that building, where that gentleman is, that last gentleman that you see in that picture, we have
Hmm.
an exhibit on the story of Emmett Till, who, as you know, was lynched in 1955, 14-year-old boy that came to Mississippi from Chicago.
Yeah.
And he violated the segregationist practices that took place here in Mississippi. And his life was snuffed for it. And so that, but the reason why that story is important is not just because he was murdered. It's because of the efforts of his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, after he was murdered. She led a campaign for justice for the rest of her life after he was murdered. And another part of that story is many of the people that went on to become leaders in the civil rights movement here in Mississippi consider themselves a part of the Emmett Till generation. And so we
Mm.
thought it was so important that we had an exhibit and a film narrated by Oprah Winfrey in our museum about the story of Emmett Till.
No, I do. We don't have time to speak anymore about it, but just the new information that's come out about the tragedy in recent years and his mother's efforts did not go in vain, for sure,
That's
for
right.
sure.
That's right.
In closing, Michael, and there's so much more we could have talked about, can talk about, but this is a wonderful introduction and to encourage, inspire people to visit the museums. Briefly, what are some current or upcoming plans you and others have in mind for the museums?
Well, Jay, I can tell you because I just got the email, but we just announced today
Oh,
that
okay.
the breaking news, but we just announced today that the family of Fannie Lou Hamer has donated the Presidential Medal of Honor that she received from President Biden a few years ago to the museum.
Wow. Oh, congratulations. Wow, what a coup.
So I'm excited about that. That's positive. That's something that recognizes her national significance, which I think is very, very important. We've got an exhibit up now called "Her Mississippi Remembers Hurricane Katrina,"
Hmm.
photographs by Melody Golden. That's been excellent. This year's 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. Uh,
Crazy.
Unbelievable. And so that exhibit is getting ready to close in early November, and so we're trying to do a lot of programming to try to get folks to come out before it goes away.
Sure.
But that exhibit has been very, very popular. And then every Wednesday at noon at the museums, we have a program called History is Lunch
Hmm.
that takes place about an hour, and we just invite somebody to come and talk about some aspect of Mississippi history.
Oh,
It's a
fabulous.
very, very popular program. And that's despite the fact that I'm sure a lot of folks just come for the free cookie and coffees. That's
Can't
fine,
blame.
whatever it takes.
Exactly. You can't blame them. Well, Michael, this has been such a pleasure. We have to end it for now, but I want
Yes.
to wish you and your colleagues just continued success with future endeavors related to both museums. So informative, and we really appreciate your time very much. Continued success.
Thank you, Jay, for having me. And let me know if you're ever down here in Mississippi.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Also, want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.